Greetings everyone, thank you for coming to my channel. This video is titled, Should I Use Which or That? And before I get started, I wanted to genuinely thank you guys for the love and support because I realized there are a lot of other channels out there that you guys could have gone to, but you came to mine and I really appreciate that. Okay, so first we have the terms you need to know in order to understand this video, and I'll be defining these terms in the next slide. So first we have dependent clause, which is also known as relative clause, independent clause, essential clause, and non-essential clause. Dependent clauses express incomplete thoughts. They are not sentences. So our first example says, because I'm happy. So first off, we never start sentences with because. Well, there are some exceptions, but this is not an exception because it doesn't make sense. And it's an incomplete thought. Now, if I said I'm going to the beach because I'm happy, that would make sense. But just saying because I'm happy doesn't make sense. Our next example says to cook breakfast, and this is also an incomplete thought. Now, if I said I woke up early to cook breakfast, that would be a complete thought, which isn't the case here. So this isn't a sentence. And our last example says at the park. Notice how this isn't a complete thought. Now, if I said I'm eating at the park, that would be a complete thought, but that isn't the case here. Independent clauses express complete thoughts and can stand alone. There is always a subject and a verb. And also, independent clauses are also known as sentences. That's just a fancy way of saying sentence. Our first example says, my sister is wearing a pink jacket. So notice how the sentence has a subject, sister, and it has a verb, well, two verbs, is and wearing. So it's a complete sentence or a complete thought. Our second example says, my birthday is in November. So notice how we have a subject, which is birthday, and we have a verb, which is. So this is a complete sentence or a complete thought. And our third example says, I live in a mansion. So notice how we have a subject, which is I, and then we have the verb, which is live. So this is a complete sentence or complete thought. An essential clause is info that is needed in order to understand a sentence. Without that info, the sentence won't make sense or it'll have a different meaning. So our first example says, I have a friend that only wears purple clothes. So the essential clause that only wears purple clothes is giving us more info about the friend. So without the essential clause that only wears purple clothes, the sentence wouldn't have the same meaning. It would just say, I have a friend. Our second example says, I need a jacket that has a hood on it. So the essential clause is that has a hood on it. If we take that has a hood on it out of the sentence wouldn't have the same meaning. It would just say, I need a jacket. And our last example says, I want a car that has tinted windows. So the essential clause is that has tinted windows. And if we take this out of the sentence wouldn't have the same meaning. The sentence would just say, I want a car. Non-essential clauses provide extra info that must be enclosed in commas. The meaning of the sentence will stay the same even if the extra info is taken out. Our first example says, my mom, who is very irresponsible, lost her keys again. So if we take who is very irresponsible out of the sentence, also known as the non-essential clause, the sentence would say, my mom lost her keys again. So the sentence would still make sense. Our second example says, my attitude, which is very bad, has gotten me in big trouble. So if we take the non-essential clause, which is very bad, out of the sentence would say, my attitude has gotten me in big trouble. Notice how the sentence would still make sense. And our last example says, the little boy whose shirt is red just fell off the swing. So our non-essential clause in this sentence is whose shirt is red. So if we take out whose shirt is red, the sentence would say, the little boy just fell off the swing. So the sentence would still make sense. Which is a relative pronoun and it's used with non-essential clauses. Relative pronouns introduce dependent clauses and connect them to independent clauses. Relative pronouns can be people, things, or both. So our first example says, my car, which is very unreliable, broke down while I was driving to work. So notice how which is being used with the non-essential clause. So the whole non-essential clause says, which is very unreliable. And if you take this out of the sentence would still make sense. It would say, my car broke down while I was driving to work. So I guess the simple way of saying this would be, which is pretty much used with dependent clauses. And as we discussed earlier, dependent clauses are incomplete thoughts, so they're not sentences. Our second example says, my hair, which is very curly, is hard to manage at times. So notice how which is being used to introduce a dependent clause. In other words, a thought that's incomplete. And our last example says, her mom's house, which is huge, is located by the beach. So notice how which is being used to introduce a dependent clause, also known as an incomplete thought. And also notice how in each of these examples, which is being used for non-essential clauses. In other words, extra info. Which can also be used as an interrogative pronoun. Interrogative pronouns are used to ask questions. The answer to the question is always a noun. And a noun is a person, place, or thing. Which is used when asking about a selection or choice. So for our first example, the question is, which holiday is your favorite? And our answer says, Christmas is my favorite holiday. So notice how with our question, we were asking about a selection or choice, and our answer is Christmas, which is a noun. So for our second example, the question says, which shirt looks better, the blue one or the pink one? And the answer says, the pink shirt looks better. So notice how for our question, we're asking about a selection or a choice. So which shirt looks better? And the choices are the blue one and the pink one. And our answer is the pink shirt, which is a noun. And for our last example, the question says, which table would you like to sit at? And the answer says, I'd like to sit at the table in the corner. So notice how the question is asking about a selection or choice. And the answer is actually a noun phrase, but table is a noun. That is used for essential clauses. Without that, the meaning of the sentence would change. Our first example says, I'm using my umbrella that I bought yesterday. So notice how if we take out that, the sentence would say, I'm using my umbrella I bought yesterday. So in this case, the meaning of the sentence wouldn't change, but the sentence just wouldn't be grammatically correct. In other words, saying I'm using my umbrella I bought yesterday wouldn't be the proper way of saying that. You would have to say I'm using my umbrella that I bought yesterday. Our second example says, I want the pink Skechers that light up. Notice how if we take that out of the sentence, it would say, I want the pink Skechers light up. And that wouldn't make sense. And our last example says, I want a dog that has small ears. If we took that out of the sentence, it would say, I want a dog has small ears. And that wouldn't make sense. So that's why we have to use that. Thank you guys for coming. I hope you found this video informative. If you did find this video informative, please feel free to like, comment, or subscribe, or all of the above, and I'll see you next time.